Well, folks, it's time for another Maw and Disorder card review. This time around, we've got Hunter cards, Paladin cards, and Warrior cards, and the shiny new legendary for Hunter. This is Defense Attorney Nathanos, a new 6-mana 5/4 with a battle cry that does a lot of things. Number one, discover a friendly death rattle minion that died this game. You also trigger that minion's death rattle, so right away you get a death rattle activation, and you gain its death rattle as well. So Nathanos also gets that bonus death rattle on him. So essentially you get a card in hand, you get an instant death rattle, and you get this body with a death rattle attached to it as well. And that's a lot of stuff going on for a single card. A little bit of value generation, potentially some immediate tempo or some kind of advantage off that death rattle trigger, and then this minion that might have like a sticky, annoying body to deal with as well. And that's generally a recipe for success for a card like this one. It just does so many things, certainly fits the synergy patterns of Hunter. Death rattle minions are played a lot. Currently in Beast Hunter, we have a handful of death rattles that would work, I think, rather well with Nathanos. Not like an A+ home run, but you've got the 4-mana beasts like the Saber and the Ram. Those could be death rattles that come down earlier than Nathanos, so he's ready to go on curve. You've also got like Rat King, which that one's not so exciting, I don't think, personally, and Mountain Bear, which would be decent as well. And you could maybe see a list tweaked to better accommodate Nathanos as well with some chunkier death rattles. And I have to say, I don't think Nathanos really lines up super well in the current version of Beast Hunter. It's weird that we have the best deck in the game as Beast Hunter. This guy kind of fits in that deck, but I don't know if he'll be good enough to disrupt the current builds. Like, the way that deck goes, it makes a lot of sense right now. I don't think this adds a lot by playing into your 4-mana death rattles, probably most successfully and most often. That doesn't seem like a great use case for this card, but I don't think that dooms it forever. This does so much. I'm sure that there will be some builds of Hunter that run perhaps bigger death rattles, and they don't have to be beasts. This is just death rattle minions. So, you know, a big Stoneborn General down the road, for instance, would be insane for something like Nathanos. So we just need the deck to move around a little bit for higher payoff death rattles, or even maybe like stickier on-board death rattles. And, you know, we could see lists shift into making Nathanos a really powerful sort of play. So that may not happen right away. Beast Hunter's so good right now, that might be something that comes along like post-rotation, for instance, where Nathanos really starts to shine. So I wouldn't be shocked or alarmed if this card falls just a little bit short in the short term. Maybe he doesn't get play right away, but it's definitely one I'd keep an eye on. I think Nathanos just has so many effects and is rather efficient at 6 mana in regards to all of the stuff that it does, that this will eventually be a pretty solid card. Moving on to a new secret for Hunter. This is Motion Denied. It's a 2-mana spell, of course. Secret: after your opponent plays 3 cards in a turn, deal 6 damage to the enemy hero. So this is effectively a Rat King that skips the rat and just throws it right at the opponent's face, dealing the 6 damage immediately. And, you know, in its era, Rat King was a pretty solid secret. I remember a lot of times getting those surprising Rat Kings that would come at the end of a turn and you know, hit your opponent for 6, and they'd have to deal with a 6/6 body. And, you know, in theory, that 6/6 on board is notably better if it gets to attack face than just the 6 damage, because it's a problem for your opponent to deal with that body. They have to actually address the minion as well. So in some ways this looks weaker, but in other ways I think the immediacy of the damage here can be really impactful. I can see a lot of scenarios where this straight up just ends a game because it's just that lethal hit that you need for 6. That won't always be something that's great for, you know, a face Hunter build. They're not usually running a lot of secrets, but I like the way too that this is just lying in wait, and it's this sort of inevitability that could also just keep your opponent in check, where they have to just only play 2 cards, or it's like, well, I might literally be dead if I play 3 cards. So it creates some of that pushback in the actual game state as well, just because it exists and because you might be running it and might be punishing them. I think that's pretty cool. It's also been confirmed that the Tavish version of this, well, not confirmed, but Cora, who was the set lead for this one, said she thinks it does 9. So 9 damage is the most likely damage output for the Tavish upgraded version of this, which actually is kind of a crazy damage output for a secret off Tavish. So all in all, I do think this is one of those useful secrets. Now, right now, Secret Hunter doesn't get played. We don't see Hunter secrets much in Quest Hunter. This would be a great fit. I don't think this is good enough to bring Quest Hunter back from the dead in a post-nerf world. It's a deck that gets played just a tiny bit these days, but really not at a notable level. Sorry, I just wanted to confirm that, which, you know, this is a great fit for going face in regards to spells dealing damage. So maybe it's enough to push Quest Hunter back from the brink. I don't know. But beyond that, again, this is one of those cards where right now I'm not sure this will find a home, but it has just a lot of latent power. This feels like a card that's going to be good at some point, because I do think that 6 damage is really threatening. Is it as good as Rat King? Probably not. Is this the most powerful Hunter secret? No, because it might take a long time to come into impact, but I still think the inevitability of damage output in Hunter is one of its strongest suits, and this fits that rather well. So I think this is a reasonably solid card. We won't say strong, we'll say solid in this case. So moving on here, we have the Shadehound, a 5-mana 6/5 beast for Hunter. Reads, whenever this attacks, give your other beasts +2/+2. And then if you infuse this with 3 beasts specifically, it's also going to gain Rush. And man, that is just a lot of stuff. Once again, on this card, a very big sort of effect. A 6/5 with Rush is not that bad on its own right. Just clear something off. And if you happen to have any beasts lingering around, little 1/1 tokens would be the probably most common strategy for this one. Well, those are also going to get really big. And, you know, sometimes even if you have 6-7 mana and a couple things to play with this, you might be able to buff them right away as well. So the output here for Shadehound is really, really high. That is like a Bloodlust on a stick, or let's say maybe a Savage Roar on a stick, that also just gives you a bunch of stats in case it's not lethal just yet. And we've seen a lot of this tokeny rat hunter stuff that's been this undercurrent for a handful of different expansions now that has not found success. Like, I've made it work in duels, but not in standard format. Cards like this could be the sort of thing that are strong enough to push that archetype into viability. We've got ways to just make big wide boards of 1/1s and small rush beasts and so on, and having the Shadehound as the big payoff for doing that. Just anytime you stick 2 or 3 minions on board, suddenly the Shadehound becomes an enormous risk for your opponent. It just could be so swingy and overwhelm them with raw stats, taking a clean trade and buffing the board for a bunch. And some people will call that a win more card. I've never really talked about win more cards this much in reviews, but it's come up a lot this week because I keep seeing that as a conversation point. But I don't think it is. I think it's actually a finisher card. This has the potential to just end games, not just develop on things that you've already done well. So because this offers some lethality with it, I don't think that's a big concern for this. I actually think that makes it a nice centerpiece or follow-up on those kinds of decks. Now, again, it's tied very specifically to that fate. I don't think this gets played in like Beast Hunter right now. The shapes of it, the kinds of boards that tend to stick around, you know, yes, sometimes post Hydralodon, that could be nice, but it can also disrupt your minion pool here as a 5-mana beast for things like the Pet Collector. And if you're pulling it out of deck specifically, it's not going to be infused unless you also run that other new card that I don't think is very good. So all in all, you know, another one that's not a good fit right now, but it has a lot of power here, and it's supporting an archetype that could be good later, which I guess that's kind of a theme for all 3 of these Hunter cards. I think they're all doing really big, cool stuff, just don't fit at the moment. So I actually like these kinds of cards because they can help support archetypes that aren't currently seeing a lot of play. And I think this one's strong enough, it could actually even incentivize that archetype. This card is just big and kind of crazy. So next up, we have warrior cards hot off the presses. This is Weapons Expert, a new 3-mana 3/2 for warrior battlecry. If you have a weapon equipped, give it +1/+1. So that's a neat little mini green skin effect here for a 3-mana card. Otherwise, if you don't have a weapon equipped, you get to draw a weapon. So this is also a weapon tutor in some cases. And I think that's actually pretty cool for Enraged Warrior builds currently with Imbued Axe. I feel like Axe is one of the strongest cards in Enraged Warrior lists. Often it feels like if I have the Axe, I'm winning and I'm doing awesome things. And if I don't have the Axe, I'm losing and not doing awesome things. Now, the downside here is they are both 3 mana, which does kind of create some mana conflicts there. Like, you might want to play this on 2 and the Axe on 3, but I don't think that's a huge whiff either way. I think you're still happy to tutor your Axe, and you'll probably have a 1-mana play to weave in with it later on curve. And of course, there's other parts of the game as well, just to help you find your weapons, maybe a second weapon. And then on top of that, buffing the Axe is also really powerful, I think. Just getting a body and getting another swing or 2 on that Axe can go a really long way towards shoring up those boards. So I do think this is a pretty good fit for Enraged Warrior currently, which has been a deck that's continued to float around, you know, almost playable, almost good, let's say, almost good status in the meta for a while now. It's basically still a tier 4-ish deck if you look at most data, but like it's kind of close. Good players can make it work, sort of thing. So it might help, right? That could give Enraged Warrior a chance. Now, there's also, outside of Enraged Warrior, in general, like, you know, weapon tutors are powerful. We saw like Corsair Cash in the past work really nicely. That did give that durability bonus, but this gives a body with it, so maybe you're not sacrificing quite as much early tempo whilst trying to tutor towards some sort of powerful weapon. And I think Imbued Axe is the best example of that right now, but in the future, there could be other weapons that are really nice to grab with the Weapons Expert. You could also see just more of a weapon-focused build where this serves as an upgrade option for your weapon, just giving it those bonus stats, getting some aggressive bodies down. So I do think the Weapons Expert has a lot to offer here. This looks like a pretty strong card to me. Now, unfortunately, not all these Warrior cards I think are going to be strong, because I think they need it right now. It's not the best class, and the Maw Sworn Bailiff here, just, I don't think this one's going to get there. This is a 5-mana 4/4 with Taunt and Battle Cry. If you have 4 or more armor, gain +4/+4. So if you do have that armor, this is going to be a 5-mana 8/8 with Taunt. And that's better. I still don't think that's insane these days. Hearthstone plays are just so big, and big minions like that are pretty easy to deal with these days. And the time you're going to want an 8/8 with Taunt is when your opponent has gotten off to a really nice aggressive start. That might be the time you're least likely to have all of that bonus armor, if you're trying to use this as a big defensive wall. If you're, on the other hand, trying to use it more aggressively and playing it as a big 8/8 threat that's trying to whack your opponent, is that going to play well for a deck that's been gaining armor throughout the early game? If you've been spending, you know, hero powers, suddenly pivoting into a big threat on board, I don't know if that makes sense either. I think I would vastly prefer this card if it was a 5-mana 5/5 that just gave me 4 armor. I think that would probably fit better. Even that, of course, probably wouldn't be great, but that would be more in line with what I'd want. I feel like this is sort of at odds with itself in regards to game states and game plans. I just don't know how you're really going to use this one successfully. When it whiffs, of course, it is not remotely good, so it kind of has to go off to be good. Am I playing other cards once I'm gaining armor, you know, instead of this guy? Why is the 8/8 that exciting? I just don't see this one getting there. This feels awkward and clunky to me, and big 8/8 bodies on turn 5 just aren't what they used to be. So for me, the Maw Sworn Bailiff looks pretty darn weak. And then finally here we have Call to the Stand. I love this artwork, by the way. This dude looks awesome. It's so colorful. You get to see all the other characters from other classes. Like, really, really nice art piece there. This is a 1-mana spell. It reads, your opponent summons a random minion from their hand. So this can be a little bit more disruption here for Warrior. We've seen this sort of effect with cards like Vol'jin has found some success in the meta from time to time, where you know, you bounce something back and you pull your opponent's big awesome Denathrius or whatever thing you're trying to pull out of their hand. Much like you might disrupt to the Theatar, this can pull out some powerful battle cry effect that they're then going to lose because you're going to remove that minion as a part of, say, a brawl. Pulling an extra minion into a brawl seems like a good fit there, or just your shield slams or whatever other removal you're utilizing. So a way to disrupt win conditions here with Call to the Stand. And, you know, it's certainly less reliable than something like Theatar, because Theatar you're getting to discover what you're taking. And that's obviously going to increase your odds of hitting the key thing much, much more. But this is just extra versions of that. You know, it's just extra ways. If you miss on the Theatar, this gives you another chance potentially to pull that thing out of their hand and ruin it. So that could be a reason to run this if a deck just needs enough. If you're just playing a big greedy control warrior and you always lose to OTKs or Denathrius and you have to stop those, a Call to the Stand being added in is a reasonable fit. I don't know how much of that you can run in a deck without running cards that just do things to like actively make impacts, because this is often going to be a pretty big sacrifice. Sometimes it'll be too big for you to clear easily, or it'll be a problem card that you didn't really want to deal with, and you felt like you played a card and spent some mana, didn't really do much. Low overhead here at 1 mana, but the opportunity cost of that card in hand is pretty significant, especially for Warrior, which is a class I think has had a little bit of card draw struggle lately. You can't just throw away cards for effects that don't do anything if you're not repopulating your hand really easily. So I think there are some real downsides and risks to this one. Ultimately, this kind of disruption has often found a home, so I don't want to write this one off completely, but it's just not a great fit for Warrior right now, both archetypically speaking And just from that card draw weakness standpoint, I do worry about this one quite a bit, but I love the artwork so much. That just looks awesome. So moving on here, we have some Paladin cards. This is Order in the Court. Great name once again. 2-mana spell. Reorder your deck from highest cost to lowest cost and draw a card. I think this card's really, really strong. We saw Lore Keeper pull Celt not that long ago in Hearthstone as a 4-mana 4/5 that had this same effect, and then it got nerfed. So good and so relevant on ladder that card actually had to get nerfed. And this is doing the same thing, but it only has the 2-mana overhead, and it draws you a card right away on top of that. So you can kick off your chain of high value cards right off the bat. And the reason that was so good in Polkelt, right, is because you could run this really dense early game package, make sure you hit these very strong curves and hit your aggressive, early game synergies, and all of that would just be running really nicely. And then when you needed to, you could still pivot into a more consistent late game package and draw your kind of big heavy hitting bomb cards as well, so that you could then follow up and pivot into a more dominant mid to late game strategy. And you know what? I think that's going to be relevant for Paladin as well. Paladin has some really good expensive cards, things like the Cariel Hero card, for instance. So using Order in the Court as a way to get that consistent early push, and whether that's, more aggressive or perhaps even just more control, there's a lot of early game control cards. Another one we're going to see in a minute. I think this still allows you to make sure you're hitting your power band at the right time in the game, and it's just drawing a card as well, so it's just cycling through itself, so it's not even much of a tax on getting this thing moving. Whereas Polkelt, you had to spend some mana, commit most of your turn probably to getting the Polkelt down. This one does not demand that. You can keep the gas going, keep everything moving, and still get this awesome effect. So to me, this looks really, really strong. Potentially the kind of card, along with 2 more, I think, good Paladin cards that change Paladin's fate. This one might actually be enough. I think we'll see this in a lot of different Paladin decks. Moving on to Class Action Lawyer. This is another strong card, I think. 2-mana, 2/3 Paladin minion, Battlecry. If your deck has no neutral cards, set a minion's stats to 1/1. So more pure Paladin support in this case, and a really, really big debuff here on the Class Action Lawyer. This kind of reminds me of Aldor Peacekeeper of old, the 3-drop that would reduce attacks to 1. That was a staple for Paladin for a long time, but this is even more efficient, and the effect is better because it's also reducing the health, making the minion that needs to be killed very, very easy to deal with, for instance. So for pure Paladins, this is something that can deal with big 8/8s later in the game, or gigantic insatiable devourers, or whatever you need it to if you're saving it for that crazy big removal. But sometimes I think in a faster deck, this might be worth it just to take your opponent's 3/3 and make it a 1/1, negate the impact of that on board while still playing stuff yourself. And if you have a nice smooth flow of minions in the early game, this is gonna fit right in, I think, in many cases. So I think this card has that dual utility case where it's not bad early in the game, just a bit of a tempo swing, and then also has that removal utility late, or negation of your opponent's scary thing late as well. So I think you could see this across the curve, basically, in a handful of different Paladin decks. This one just looks flexible and powerful. And then finally, we have Jury Duty, a new 3-mana spell. It's going to summon you 2 Silverhand Recruits and give your Silverhand Recruits +1/+1. So a mini Arbor Up is how I saw this described. And okay, yeah, I get it. It's a cheap little Arbor Up. You get some minions and you buff them along the way. So at a base level on an empty board, of course, this is just 2 Silverhand Recruits minus any Stewart shenanigans that might be buffing one of these summoned recruits. But if you are able to stick some recruits or play them simultaneously out here with the Jury Duty, then this becomes a much more notable buff. You're getting that +1/+1 across your board. Now, +1/+1 buffs have historically cost about 1 mana. We have a handful of these in history that cost 1 mana. So in some ways, it does kind of feel like you're paying 2 mana for 2 Silverhand Recruits, which isn't exactly the most efficient. Now, there's always value in bundling effects together, because you only have to play 1 card to get both effects. And I do think this is just so synergistic with the Silverhand Recruit package that helps. That said, is this enough to make Silverhand Recruits its own viable archetype? I don't think so. I'm sorry to say. This is the right kind of card for that deck, but I don't think it's so powerful that it totally pushes Silver Hand Recruits. Now, I hope it does. I hope I'm wrong. I really like playing fun dude paladin stuff. Probably only because it's not good, though. If it got good, I don't know that I would love playing it so much. But I don't think this really, you know, fits or plays super well into, say, like a questline paladin. If this was like summon a 1/1 and give your stuff +1/+1, that would be, number one, a super strong card, but number two, the kind of thing that really helped enable questline paladin. There is, you know, I think some aggro non-questline stuff that can use Silver Hand Recruits to some success. This would fit a little better in that sort of package, but still makes me I'm not excited about it. Like, I'm not convinced this really pushes things hard enough to make that powerful. So, you know, I think it's okay. Some potential is there. Silver Hand Recruits still need a lot more help, though, I think, to really make this one to fit in nicely. So I am not sure, for instance, compared to the Hunter cards that I thought really pushed the power, I don't know that this one does. Defense Attorney Nathanos is a 4-star card. Motion Denied is a 3-star card. Shade Hound is a 4-star card. Weapons Expert is a 4-star card. Call to the Stand is a 3-star card. Maw Sworn Bailiff is a 2-star card. Order in the Court is a 5-star card. Class Action Lawyer is a 4-star card. Jury Duty is a 3-star card. And there you go, folks. That wraps it up for review number 3 for Maw and Disorder. Curious what you think about these cards. Is Paladin actually going to be a real Hearthstone class? Were these cards enough? Share those thoughts and more down there in the comments below. Thanks much as always for watching, and until next time, game on.